We also have Tommy. Tommy is an instructor with App Academy. I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more. Benji is with Make Games With Us, which is an iPhone game development program. And we have Vinay, who is an investor, author. How do you describe yourself?
Yeah.
So I figured just tell us a little bit about yourself to start, about your background in technology.
So I taught myself how to code, like most developers out there. I actually studied econ in college, but I knew from very early on that I didn't really like that. So I taught myself to code, and then actually I moved to Miami for a while. I started a car dealership over there, and I made an internal tool that helped us find the cheapest cars in the country. And then after that, I spent way too much time just running this company. So, and I didn't spend any time coding after that. So I decided I had to do something more related to development, to software development. And I found App Academy. Cool. Where I teach that.
Okay, I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Mine is a little bit more straightforward. So I was interested in computers and programming back when I was 14 or 15. I grabbed a book in the library about programming, and it was horrible because it's very difficult at the beginning to get over the first bump with any tutor. But then I found an extracurricular teacher at school. He had, like, in his free time, he taught programming, and that's how I got my first introduction. So it was kind of cool. And then I knew from there on that I definitely want to do software development, and I went to college in Germany. And we have a different model there at some schools that allow to study with corporations, so that's kind of interesting. That means I studied together with IBM as a company, and then I spent 3 months at a university and 3 months in a company working in, like, kind of internships basically. After that I graduated, worked for 2 years in Germany, and came here to join Make Games With Us because it basically covers my background in iPhone development, in teaching, which I did in Germany a little bit too, and yeah, that's it.
Cool. All right. Hi everyone, I'm Vinay. I have a computer science background and was working for a seed stage venture firm for a little while, and I guess between the two it's sort of hard not to catch the tech bug, and so I joined a tech startup called Loku that was out of Boston. We raised Series A, we moved out to San Francisco. I was sort of commuting back and forth between the two. I was running growth and analytics for the company. What we essentially did in a nutshell was sort of we basically developed a process to structure unstructured data. Some of you might be familiar, but 75% of the world's data is unstructured, so we can't really analyze it or act on it. We developed a process to structure it, and so we tackled the local business space where we scraped every restaurant menu in America, their menu offline. We structured all that data, and so questions like, what's the average price of a pizza in New York? You can't really answer that now. I mean, you would have to, I guess, manually go to every restaurant and sort of compute an average. Now that we've structured all, we can start sort of answering those questions. So we gave all that data to merchants, restaurant owners, and they can sort of be more efficient. We partnered with Yelp and OpenTable, so if you use those apps, you'll notice that they have menus now. That's all powered by Loku. Anyway, I love the experience, but it came to an end. We were acquired last summer, and we were acquired by GoDaddy. That's sort of a separate question. I wasn't a huge fan of that, but alas, since they didn't say I could work next to Danica Patrick, I left, and I sort of moved back to the investing space. Sort of right now, sort of in a transitionary mode. I published a book called How to Speak Tech, which covers the basic technologies of internet startups for people who don't have a technical background. I guess in my experiences before, people who were non-technical couldn't really contribute to the conversation in the same way, and that was something that I wanted to see change. So published the book earlier, I guess at the end of last year. I've been busy sort of promoting that, and as a result have started to consult through that as well.
Want to give a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So as Brian mentioned, I've been with Talener for just about 4 years now, and unlike these guys, I'm not myself a programmer or technically capable, but I am very passionate about the tools and the technology, and very immersed in the New York City tech market. Since I've been with Talener, I've covered various different technologies, anywhere from back-end oriented Java, software development, .NET development, quality assurance. I spent the last 2 years up until last month managing our front-end JavaScript and mobile practice, and I've now kind of moved back and am now working closely with our software team. So, these guys are more the kind of the tech muscle, but hopefully I can add some color to the how that relates to the hiring market here in New York and the current climate, and how that connects with the topic of tech education in New York and just what we're seeing from a staffing standpoint that might benefit you guys.
Cool. And I have a couple questions I'm going to go through. We're sort of going to play it by ear, see how the conversation goes. But if you guys have any questions for them, you can feel free to shout out. We'll make this relatively informal and discussion-ish. So one thing that kind of interests me is the talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Should be integrated earlier and earlier, either in elementary schools or middle schools, or high school is a little bit more advanced by then. I was curious to get your thoughts just on the start about either teaching coding or teaching some sort of basic technology at a young age. Is it worth it? What do you think people get out of it? Do you think it's worth it? And just the whole atmosphere around that, because there's a lot of debate whether people think kids should be learning how to code. Is it really going to help them? Should they be taking math? So, whoever wants to chime in.
I'm going to say definitely no. Our business model depends completely on people not knowing anything. No, just kidding. There definitely is a movement towards more of that, and I think it's great. I think it's awesome. The only reason that companies like App Academy exist is because there's definitely a gap that needs to be filled. So if I think that this should definitely be filled earlier on, and people shouldn't have the need to pivot at I don't know, our average age of our students is like 25, 28. They have to spend 3 months not working, right? 3 months not making any money while they take the course, and I think that's kind of crappy, right? And it would be a lot better if these people could just learn this from the beginning, and if it would be a lot more accessible to people to start experimenting with this at a much earlier age.
And I see a lot of people think that not everyone's either able to code or coding isn't meant for everyone. Do you think that just starting it at a younger age in general?
I would like to go back to the first question also,
Yeah,
if you don't mind. I think there are two different aspects when it comes to teaching coding at school. One is the question, does everyone have to be a software developer, and is the current demand we have, is that a sign that we need more developers? I think that's not a basic question. It's more that the framework of thinking when you learn to code, I think that is something that's relevant for everyone. So if you could teach it in a more abstract model, like just the basic concepts of understanding how to structure a problem into smaller problems and how to use existing solutions to solve the problem, that's basically what programming is. So I think if you would teach that earlier, even people that don't want to be software developers can profit from that. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is that in every industry, probably in the future, computer science is going to be kind of important. So even if you're not a software developer in your job, you can leverage the knowledge you have in programming to achieve whatever goal you want. So from these two different aspects, I think there's nothing that speaks against it, teaching it earlier.
Yeah,
it's probably.
I would add, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it definitely sort of changes the way you sort of approach problems and think. I work closely with the New York City Foundation for Computer Science Education, started by Fred Wilson, and there's a number of sort of prominent people on the board, and we're trying to get computer science education in every New York City school. So I guess by definition I am in favor of that. But STEM I think is, President Obama sort of realized this. A lot of people realize it's very key to innovation, long-term innovation. Technology is a huge part. And so I think just introducing it earlier just can really sort of help change the dynamics of our economy, really even. And so I guess some people also throw the word or arts into STEM, STEAM, because I think we all realize sort of design and sort of a focus on that is also very important. So there are a number of things that can sort of add to it, but I don't know.
Is there a question over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're in that committee, can you get them to give her a job?
What was that?
Could you get them to get rid of Java?
Another question?
So how do you guys see this, like, you know, starting technology, like education earlier, kind of impacting how many women are going into the field? You know, you've
I want
seen,
to take that one.
yeah, you've seen like Goldie Blocks kind of make this huge run. Where like trying to get girls like have toys earlier. They kind of bring them into math and science, and I mean even these days, like we still see, I would say like 70% of our candidates are male. And do you see that starting it earlier really bringing more women into the field?
Okay. One thing I see a lot when we try to get a lot of people into CS that haven't been exposed before, and especially among girls, the problem is that computer science is kind of intimidating if they haven't been confronted with it before, because a lot of people give an introductory course, and it's very difficult once you got behind the wall of understanding how programming works to go back and to explain it to someone who never did it before. And then people get confronted with a lot of terminology that they never heard before. And in average, that intimidation basically holds a lot of people off of actually learning it, because they say, that's not for me and I will never understand it. So if we would have it like with math or science, where we see that women perform basically as well as men in school and teach at the same point, then we wouldn't have the difference of people that started like 5 years before that come in 20 years later. So I think that would solve a big part of that problem.
Yeah. To add on to that, I think it's interesting that if you poll boys and girls when they're when you poll boys and girls when they're in 4th grade and ask them about their interest in science, you'll like notice that they're pretty comparable. But then if you poll again boys and girls who are in high school, for example, and ask them the same questions, like that's when you sort of notice the skew towards men. And so like there's definitely this period of time, middle school, college, whatever the years are, where girls sort of drop off that interest. I think there's certain aspects that are more cultural, stereotypes. It's not. I don't think it's really a question of accessibility. I think it's sort of other things that are dominating in that space. But I think if you were to integrate, computer science earlier, sort of make it more acceptable, make it fun, enjoyable, sort of get over some of those cultural barriers. Like I definitely think that it's important, and to the extent that introducing computer science earlier helps that, like I definitely think it's a great thing. So.
But my understanding of this whole issue is that women were sort of the original computer scientists. If you look at what was happening prior to World War II, but in the past 10 years, I work in education. I'm not a programmer. I don't work in programming. But my understanding is that there's sort of this culture that has emerged in the world of programming. It's very male. It's very chauvinistic. There have been some very public issues occurring at some of these public hacker type events. What's your sort of response to that, and what is the industry doing to counter that kind of trend? It doesn't matter what you do at school. If you send a woman to work in a place and somebody is behaving in a chauvinistic way, she's either going to call him an asshole and get fired for calling him an asshole, or she's going to say, I'm going to work somewhere else. So how do you kind of deal with that from an industry perspective?
It's kind of early, honestly, to be able to tell how this is going to play out. But I do think that there's a huge push towards incorporating more women into the field. Like for example, our female students get hired a lot quicker than the male students. But we do have a lot less girls coming in the first place. So that's kind of odd. But I do think that if we start teaching earlier, when people were just younger in middle and in elementary school, that those barriers that they feel later on in life, they won't feel them as strong because they're already going to know just as much, right? So it'll make it a lot more accessible for them in the first place, I think.
And probably in a work environment that's more diverse from the beginning, these problems probably wouldn't emerge. So there are more problems of coming into a dominated male workspace, but if you can fix that in the future, that it's from upfront more diverse, then probably the culture will also change. I think that's basic hope.
Sure.
We had a question here.
Oh, I was just going to ask Tommy, this question's for you. I've heard a lot of our candidates speaking recently about like general assembly classes, and I just wanted to ask, like, how do you guys compare to them? Do you guys do the 3-month focused courses? Do you do the long-term ones that are more like comprehensive, or like how do you guys differ from them?
I'm not too familiar with the curriculum and how the classes are run, but my understanding is that we're pretty similar in the sense that we do. Well, we don't do like I think they have like executive classes that are just they just meet maybe half of the day, or maybe just at night. Our classes are full time from 9 in the morning until 6 at night, and the students are usually in the office until way later than that. On average, we see students spending between 80 and 110 hours a week in the office, and we track that. So yeah, it's pretty intensive. I think it's a lot more intensive than General Assembly. But the biggest difference though is our tuition model. That's the biggest part. We do push our students a lot harder because if we don't, our skin is in the game as much as theirs, right? We don't charge tuition up front, and we only charge tuition after they find a job. So we really push them hard.
Oh, okay, that's really insightful. Just because I've had people ask about the differences, and I wasn't really sure myself.
Yeah, I think it's just a difference in the intensity, really. Some people don't even make it through.
I've looked at both, and definitely what you're saying is absolutely true. And as far as GA goes, they have a whole range. They have like half days, night, and then they'll have 5 weeks. Just a whole panoply of this, and definitely fees go with them. So it's more.
And I know
whereas yours
GA is really
extremely
broad
focused.
too. They do everything from marketing, digital
Right.
marketing to
Exactly.
coding to you name it. they
Products,
kinda do it.
entrepreneurship. Right.
Yeah. So I've seen.
Question.
I'm sorry.
I want to know what you mean by programming. Partly because there's a whole range of things. You have people that say, yes, I can do macros in Excel. You have other people that says, yes, I learned Scratch in school, or I do Mindstorms, or I do this or do that. I can do Python, I can do whatever else. What do you mean by programming? And is it a single concept, or are we talking about individual skills on particular languages?
I would say the underlying concept is, one singular concept is basically, as I said, structuring different commands. If you want to take it even more abstract, just telling the computer to perform a certain task and making that in a kind of maybe interactive way. So HTML, for example, if you only use HTML to mark up a page, I would say that's more like Word. It's not necessarily programming. If you write a program that does anything, then I would say that is programming. So like calculate numbers and uses numbers, call a different function. Just tell the computer to do something for you instead of doing it yourself. That's maybe.
Well, what I want to do is actually get it back to the question about
Yeah.
early education. Should we be if you start kids out with Scratch?
That's fine. Scratch has the
Okay.
basic concepts.
Okay, how about Excel? People just build macros.
Yeah, use macros, that's fine too.
Okay.
I'd say it's more about the way of thinking. You realize that for every person that learns it, once you did either Excel macros or Scratch or whatever, it's very easy to pick up the different things. The hardest bump is just like at the beginning, understanding that you can basically abstract different tasks to a computer. That's the initial problem. Once you understand that, then it doesn't matter which technology, which language, which macro. Is my opinion.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I mean, when you learn computer science, the teacher will sort of arbitrarily choose a language, whatever one that they're comfortable in. But as long as you learn sort of the major concepts, the major structures, you understand what an array is and iteration, for loops. If you're trying to learn a new language or new application, you have the tools to teach yourself. And so that's the key of most of computer science education, or like sort of changing the way you think, and then to the extent that you're interested in actually programming further, you have the basics to actually teach yourself.
Do you think there's a big difference between learning CS through like a college-intensive 4-year program, and maybe you're not getting that advanced of learning how to problem solve or learning the basic foundations from like a coding school or a boot camp? I was kind of curious to get your thoughts on that, because it's just a whole different methodology when you're just going to learn, okay, I'm learning Ruby versus I'm learning the history of computer science and just building upon there. So, kind of curious to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't have a CS degree, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
But there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So obviously, in the computer science degree, you'll learn a lot more of the history, like you said, and a lot more of the theory behind everything, right? But then there's a question of how do you apply this theory, and that's where the boot camps come in. We teach the practical tools that people need to learn day to day in order to have a web developer job in our case, right? And we feel that it's not that necessary to know all of the theory and history behind it, as long as you know just enough theory to understand what you're using in your day-to-day. And obviously there's a lot of backlash from people who have done 4-year degrees. They feel like it's not fair that they're competing for the same jobs that some of the people doing the boot camps are getting. But honestly, I don't have much to say to that other than, yeah, it sucks a little bit.
I have like a background from CompSci. So yes, to answer your question, it's not about the programming language. It doesn't really matter. It's just a concept of understanding the fundamental. Boolean algebra, for example, it's pretty much 1 and zeros, right? Pretty much we're learning Boolean algebra, K-maps, whatever you call it now. It's just the concept, and then where programming language just builds on top of that concept and makes it work. And then to answer your question is where, or concern about, 4 years versus, whatever. I got into CompSci. I hated my first 3 years, didn't like it, and then I got this opportunity of like, some guy said, hey, can you make an app for me? I had a CompSci, I'm working CompSci, I didn't know what Android was. I don't know, it's program manager. It's more of that opportunity of like, you're given a challenge, and if you work through it, 3 months, you learn like that. And it's instant. If I were to give you a challenge right now, make me an application that can sell Rover in the store. It's all that time and effort of studying that actually makes it, it's a challenge. It's a challenge accepted pretty much. And that's the key point of where programmers or people that go to college, they don't have that challenge. They go to school like any other degree. You go to psychology school and you pretty much graduate with a psychology degree. What now? What's different? If you don't challenge yourself, definitely anyway. So.
Well, I had a regular CS degree, so I have a different standpoint, but not that much. I would say that from my college, what I experienced, that 75% of what I learned was probably valuable for what I do now. But the question is, how much do you have to learn up front? As I said, I studied together with companies. I basically had internships of 3 months between 3 months of college. And I would say that, especially for someone who wants to switch into CS, it's definitely possible to do a 12-week program and then start in a job and then learn the other stuff on the go. So the concept of learning 4 years up front and then going into a job is probably not necessarily the right one for CS, especially because we have changing technologies, and that's why it's anyway valuable for everyone to learn while they work and learn throughout college. So I would say the college education is valuable. It's also valuable to learn more than only one language and only what you need to apply for that language. But I think most people that actually get an engineering job will learn that while they work. So I think it's definitely a different model that also works.
Yeah. Just to add on quickly, I'd say it's not really a fair question. I don't think that computer science is the same thing as web development. What you learn in 3 months is great. Like you can put together HTML, like sort of build a quick app, but that's not the same thing as computer science. Computer science sort of includes a lot of other things about you can start thinking about algorithms. You can start thinking about runtime, other theories behind it. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but App Academy, Full Stack, these schools aren't training for sort of like really sort of sophisticated algorithm, developers or sophisticated engineers in that respect. It's sort of just cranking out sort of app makers or web developers, which is needed, but a very different skill set compared to some of the people that I graduated with are sort of like building really sophisticated machine learning algorithms for Google X or something like that. I'm not sure, but I don't know if you can necessarily learn all those skills in 3 months, nor is any of that really covered. So I think it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but if you want to just be a web developer, yeah, I guess 3 months versus 4 years,
But that's what I say. I think you can build on top of these 3 months because once you have the knowledge that you can. That's what someone else in the audience said. I'm not sure who, but it's like getting one language, understanding one programming language, understanding one framework, and then you can teach. Then you can teach other stuff yourself. Once you're part of the programmer community, it's easier to learn about what's around you, to pick up a book and learn about machine learning, for example. So that's why I say if you attend such a camp, you're definitely not on the same level as someone that went to college for 4 years, but if you work for 2 years at a great company and have people around you that are skilled, then I think after 2 years and at boot camp, you'll probably have the same skill set.
The same skill set as someone who went 4 years for computer science?
I went 3 years in Germany, but it's basically a similar step. Yeah.
So my question is just like kind of based on from like a staffing standpoint, and I'm a recruiter, we see a lot of managers who kind of equate, you know, taking one of these boot camps to kind of cramming for a test. Like, yeah, maybe you can, you know, pull out of, you know, something, but it doesn't kind of leave you with the same skills as if you'd kind of studied the whole semester long. And how do you kind of see being able to jump into a market from, you know, having a manager having to take a chance on you, not really knowing kind of what your background is or what your skill set really is, if you're just coming out of one of these academies, versus really having the confidence in someone who's taken, you know, 4 years to get a computer science degree? And can you really make a judgment about someone's skills based on what path they took towards education?
Let me take that one. Actually, we have a hiring day at the end of every cycle, and we've had a lot of companies come and be really hesitant about hiring any of our students for that same reason.
Mm-hmm.
And after seeing what the students built, some of them decided to take the risk anyways. All of those that have come back to hire more. And not only have they come back to hire more, they say that usually the students that they get aren't beginners. They're not at the level of a junior developer. They're usually somewhere between junior and mid-level, like somebody with maybe 6 to 9 months of experience already.
But how do you get someone to take that chance? Like,
Shall I finish or?
No, okay.
Okay. A couple of things to that question again. So basically, number one problem is a lot of companies don't know that, but a lot of people go through college and get a CS degree without programming. So it's possible. You can go to it's not even necessary part of every college's curriculum. So especially when it comes to CS, it's a very particular field where maybe in the US it's different when you have like top schools, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, etc. But behind that, it's very difficult to judge from a recruiter just to look at a CV and then see basically the skill set. So most companies luckily have do a good job at finding other ways to look at what people built before, for example. That is what we focus on too. And yeah, in general, IT recruiting is really difficult, and most people do it really badly wrong. But the companies that do it good, they focus on what people have built. And also, good engineers can get on a 15-minute interview with someone, and they will figure out if you understand what you need for the job. It's very easy. And I would say no one, especially out in Silicon Valley, a CS degree is not worth that much anymore. So I think especially here in the US, where you pay a lot for education, and there are a lot of alternate models coming out. I think a lot of companies are looking at these things. So I don't think it's necessarily a drawback when you apply. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, building off of what Benji said, we've had computer science people with computer science degrees come through our course and actually write more code in the 3 months at our course than during their 4 years in their computer science degree. And throughout the course, we make them, they build a range of different projects, and that ends up being their portfolio to show off to potential employers. And that's actually what they hire on.
So it just sounds like what you're saying basically is like there's the person coming from the computer science degree who maybe has all this great potential to build some groundbreaking algorithm that's completely genius, and then there's a person who has no education and just hacked their way through and solved the problem and said, oh, look what I made this thing that's just really cool, and employers want to see the cool thing, not essential for some algorithm in the cloud somewhere, you know what I mean?
Not,
I don't know.
what are you saying? Are you saying that both are basically the same?
Theoretical versus pragmatic is what I'm saying.
Basically yes, but even people can build stuff, but you'll realize like probably if you have someone that never coded before, went to a code camp and is the only engineer at the company, you would have probably a problem. But you can use that person very good in a team of engineers, and the person will grow there. But you want someone that has good enough background that, for example, when you're at a startup and your company works really great and suddenly you have like 1 million of users and the code you've written breaks because performance is bad or whatever, it's like some really deep technical problem. Then you want someone that understands a lot of the basics and a lot of the background to fix that. But you don't need 20 of these people on your team. So you need a good mixture of people that have a very solid foundation, and then you can easily add on people that have a little lighter background and can learn code. I would say
I think that's a great answer. It really depends on the nature of your app as well. I don't think Snapchat really cares if they have the deepest algorithm thinkers, for example. You know, so it really depends on sort of why you're hiring, what you need them to do.
So I have an opportunity to go to Yale for my computer science degree.
You say Yelp?
I have an opportunity to go to Yale for my computer
Yeah.
science degree.
Okay.
And I'm also considering going to App Academy. And a couple other coding boot camps are on my mind, but mostly my focus is on App Academy. But I've been trying to debate what would be the difference. I sat down with the dean of the computer science program, and he said, well, Yale has had the same exact curriculum for like almost like 20 years, and they're just now starting to like consider like Ruby and stuff like that. They like stepped into Python, but they haven't really gotten like really far into that. So I'm trying to decide like in terms of like salary versus like tuition, what would be the value? Do I go to App Academy and I sacrifice 70% of my first salary and I come out? Is that better value than going to Yale and having whatever amount of loans, but then coming out with this? What do you guys think about that?
Well, there's a time commitment also, right? That goes into
then that's the
decision.
final part.
I know some people that graduated actually from Yale. I have a friend that graduated from Yale, and he's working at Goldman Sachs right now, CS degree, and he's making $75,000. Average starting salary from App Academy is $91,000 a year. 3 months versus 4 years.
What's
Might
his
not be the
bonus
same
though?
exact
His bonus 50%?
I'd say, I mean, it's a tough question to sort of pose because you have to really sort of think about what your long-term interests are, long-term goals. If you know you want to be a web developer and you're trying to purely optimize for your return on your investment in your education, you know, it might lead you to answer App Academy. If you're sort of thinking about longer terms or like the types of people you'll meet for those 4 years, the other opportunities, maybe you don't know you want to be a programmer, maybe you are interested in finance or something else, like those are things to consider as well. I studied computer science at Harvard, so it's like a very similar program to Yale in that respect. And yeah, it's definitely more theoretical. You're not going to come out sort of, unless you sort of take the personal initiative to work on apps and whatever, with it, maybe the same background as someone coming out of App Academy. But assuming you sort of put some time in, you get some good internships, you work on things on the side, I think you'll still come out knowing those things. But again, I would, when you're weighing sort of this ROI on your investment, there are a lot more other variables you need to consider rather than just what job you get. So there's, I mean, we can sort of talk more afterwards, but I think it's a more complicated question than just how much will you get paid for your first job out of school or out of this program.
Yeah, my question probably would have been like, firstly, what is your background in computer science now, and what is your interest, what do you want to do after the program, but probably it goes beyond the scope. But two co-founders of my company are still very young, and one of them went to UCLA, one of them went to MIT for each a year, and then they dropped out. And then they got accepted into an accelerator program in Silicon Valley called Y Combinator, and they founded our company. I think that's the right way to go, if you can choose that. Because you get a credential of the university, which is kind of cool. And if you have the skills to build something next to it, you can just take a year off and do that. Yeah, but we can talk about that more later.
Actually, I'm kind of curious to hear from Justin too. What do you hear from hiring managers in terms of like educational backgrounds? Do you get a lot of backlash? Does it depend on company itself or what they expect or what they want? Or
sure. I mean, you know, I can't speak to the differences between a computer science degree or a code academy, but I think it comes down to the hiring manager, the client, as far as their perspectives on or how they're valuing a CS degree versus someone coming out of one of these boot camps. I certainly have clients that will only want to interview and only meet with candidates that have CS degrees, and some only with CS degrees from top tier schools. And then I have clients that don't care if they have a degree at all. So that really depends on the specific hiring manager. But I think that those coming out of boot camps, maybe there's a little bit more scrutinizing of some of the personal projects and passion projects that they have outside of the boot camp, because maybe they don't have oftentimes they don't have the professional experience to kind of speak to. because oftentimes there are people making career transitions that are going to these boot camps and coming out. But again, it really depends. And kind of to your question earlier, you know, I have friends that I went to school with who were, I went to Dartmouth and who have computer science degrees, who are in development and who are doing something entirely different. So to his point, you know, I don't think you really know maybe what you're going to want to do in 4 years, or if you want to stay in web development or pursue a career in technology. But if that's something you are passionate about and know you're going to end up in, then yeah, maybe a boot camp or something like App Academy might be a better next step for you at this time.
Do you see different trends in different industries of what the demands are for backends,
Yeah,
or is it really?
Yeah, a lot of times, I mean, it's really dependent upon technology. As I said, I worked our front-end mobile market, and now I'm kind of more closely working with our software team that deals with more the back-end developers. I think on the back-end side of things, there's more of a desire to see a traditional kind of CS degree, and I think on the front-end side of things, it's not as stringent. If you can build it and you have some projects and a GitHub and a personal site to kind of show what you've done, whether professionally or personally, oftentimes they'll take a chance on you if you can back that up. But those would be the two kind of big differences I've seen between, you know, a traditional CS degree and versus a boot camp or whatever you want to call it.
I want to sort of follow up on one of the earlier comments. We were talking in terms of debugging, in terms of you only need to have one expert to come in and debug. Now, that's one of the issues that I always see in terms of people. Debugging, a lot of debugging is experience, but the question is, can you teach it? Are there ways of being efficient about it? Is it part of your curriculum? Should it be part of your curriculum?
What I want to answer now is my answer to question number 4, so that's the next one. You can defer that.
Okay.
I mean, I guess just to respond to it now, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of this does come down to experience. And for example, with debugging, I wouldn't say it's like necessarily right to say like, okay, in any startup or any tech company, you have like the one guy who jumps in and sort of solves all the major problems that no one else knows. Certainly, sort of they're there to provide support, but at least at Loku, I mean, everyone was sort of encouraged to debug, especially if you're sort of at a rapidly growing tech startup. I mean, everyone's sort of expected to, and you know, there are methodologies for debugging, there are tools to help you debug, sort of as you sort of discover bugs, if that's where you build your experience. And so everyone sort of has to carry their own weight to some extent. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that sort of addresses it.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is maybe getting back to this question about 4-year versus an academy. In terms of, there's a level of theory behind debugging in some cases. I just want to know what your thoughts are.
I just think that basically, yes, 4 years is not comparable to 9 weeks, is what I said. And basically, everyone who's against the bootcamp says you can't learn to code in 8 weeks, or you can't be a good programmer in 8 weeks. And that's true, you can't be a great programmer in 8 or 12 weeks. But you can work on a job for 2 years and then you'll have the same experience. So the question is, are you just like someone like an associate developer for 2 years, learning on a real project instead of learning at college, but still learning? In both cases, I think you do need to experience on a project for a certain amount of years to just be good at it. There's no real shortcut when it comes to learning these things. So yes, you have to invest the time, but the question is, do you invest the time at a company or do you invest the time at college?
I'm just showing off my bias. I see debugging as a different process almost from writing the program.
Yes.
And I could see the academies concentrating on write the programs, get the result.
I think a couple of them focus a lot on debugging too, and whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not sure a computer science degree would necessarily teach you some of those things.
That's also true.
I think it's like a different realm. This is sort of like a practical application of some concepts you may sort of touch on in school, which is why you see, you know, people like Mark Zuckerberg. One of my closest friends dropped out of school and he started a company. They didn't have 4 years, but they're fine because at the end of the day, sort of that practical experience of building, experiencing, debugging, all of these things sort of carry more weight at the end of the day, if that's what you're doing, if that's what you're applying your skills for. So, yeah, I mean, it goes both ways, I guess.
Debugging also is,
So it goes, when you learn the tools that you're using, you also learn to debug them, right? And learning the theory behind the tools, or the theory that went into developing the tools, isn't as necessary to learn to develop with these tools. So yeah, definitely they won't have the level of experience that somebody has who's been working already and out in the field for a number of years. But we do actually teach a lot of debugging in our course. So the way that the course is taught is the students work on projects, on individual projects every single day. And whenever they run into problems like a bug or anything, I come over, or one of the other instructors comes over, and we help them debug it. And we don't give them any of the answers. We actually teach them how to debug. So we actually do a fair amount of debugging there.
Yeah, like I think the first one was over
Yeah.
there and then down here.
To answer your question for debugging, it's more of like, as a programmer, you always have to have that corner case, like what if, what if it was no, what if it's zero, etc. It's always that mentality when you're problem solving. You always gotta like account for the corner case, and I think that's like the mentality that all programmers should have by default. And even though if you miss it hypothetically, it's not saying you're a bad programmer, you just miss it. It's just like there's plenty of if there's open source technology, there's plenty documentation on that. And there are, if you do have an exception or some sort of error, most of the time it throws the line number hypothetically. And there's definitely like unit testing. There's a lot of testing tools out there to actually prevent all that QA testing. You can pretty much remove QA hypothetically if you're a good programmer, but the QA just to just double checking, right? So to answer your question, it's more if you are in development, you always have to account for what if. That's the question.
But you're actually getting towards some of the concepts I'm thinking of in terms of programming style, elegance of code, things like that.
So if it comes to that, right, for programming style, I built my own methodology. I worked in some software company for like 2 years. I realized that if there is, I'm not sure, I guess it's pretty much relates. If there's like a static variable that, I'm not sure, not most programmers, but if you know that there's always a static, you always make a constant for that stuff. And throughout your entire application, it's consistency, really. It's how you program, it's how you comment, it's how you write your function, it's how you indent your lines, especially indenting your lines, break lines, etc. It's more of you gotta grow into that style and keep consistent. Because if you hypothetically put an underscore for some variable, but everything else is camel case, there's a total problem. There's an issue. It's black and white in programming. You gotta be consistent.
So compared, so there's a bunch of code boot camps within New York City. You have Dev Boot Camp, Flatiron School, App Academy, and the General Assembly, which those are the 4 that I know of. Can you speak, if any of you have some more personal experience, like pros and cons of within it? I know that's sort of like this was the spot.
Pros and cons. Well, as far as App Academy is concerned, like I mentioned before, we're the only ones that have the tuition model that we have, where we don't charge up front. We only charge after our students find a job. So I think that shows a very high level of confidence in our product. Also, not all of the boot camps make their placement information public. We say it flat out, what our average starting salary is and what our placement rate is. And I think those are probably the 2 most important decision factors.
Are there any other decision factors you think should come into mind?
Well, I mean, then it becomes more of a personal issue about how long the course is, how long you can live without making any money, because you still have to pay rent, obviously. And then there's also the decision about what technologies you want to learn, if you have an inclination towards any. Right. For example, Benji here with their company, they teach iOS development, right, to make iPhone apps or any iOS apps. We teach web development based on Ruby on Rails. There's a difference there. So I would definitely research those out and make a decision based on that stuff.
I hate to be this guy. This is sort of in two parts. First one mostly for Tommy, but second one for everybody. I don't know how many other people. I'm a product manager. I've never coded, but I've worked on stuff across maybe half a dozen different platforms. If I wanted to learn a little bit about development that would be applicable, I don't know what my next platform's going to be. What's something I could do? Considering I'm never going to be a programmer. But is there something that's broadly applicable that I can do? The second part is, should I do that? I mean, from your perspective as coders, would you rather work with somebody who knows a little bit about coding, or would you rather that if I just dealt with the stakeholders and left you to do the code?
Great question. Love it. If you just learned a little bit, like the basics, what's a string, what's an array, there's not really much you will be able to contribute with that to the development of a product.
Or destroy.
Or destroy, true. But yeah, learning definitely wouldn't hurt. I don't know how much you'll be able to contribute to the actual project, but yeah, I would definitely learn something. What you should learn, I really like Ruby. Ruby reads like English. I think it's the easiest one to learn. Coming into programming for it to be your first language, I think it's very easy to learn. But that said, you're a product manager. You might want to learn the technologies that your company is using.
Sure.
I think it's definitely valuable for you probably to understand what is going on in the project better. I don't know which relationship you have to your developers, but I've experienced in some companies it's a little bit difficult to build trust between a development team and a product side team. And there can firstly be very helpful that a product manager knows how hard technology can be sometimes, but also not to interfere in the project obviously, but just to have the necessary background of estimating how much one work package could take, for example. I think that is definitely valuable, and I think that you can do probably on your side, starting with very basic programming, but then very fast you can move on to using like frameworks that do most of the stuff for you, and just get an understanding of how parts of a program work together. But, I think it's valuable, definitely, if you have some free time.
Yeah, I'd give a little shameless plug for my book, How to Speak Tech. I don't think that everyone needs to be able to code Facebook in 2 weeks. It's probably not even good for society if everyone were that good at programming, you know. But I do think everyone should understand the basics of how Facebook works. And I think that basic knowledge really can help give you some respect with your engineers, and I think that's hugely important. Again, like knowing what an array is and what a string is, and sort of what the front end, back end, database, how do they interact. Like, you're not going to all of a sudden be able to sort of give them insights to unlock some new, ability. But I think that they'll sort of recognize that you can sort of speak the talk a little bit, and I think that goes a long way. So, for what it's worth, check out How to Speak Tech.